Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so we have the world champion playing the U.S. champion in the Opera Euro Meltwater Champions Chess Tour. The first game was pretty nice. There was kind of some chances here and there. There was a couple inaccuracies that kind of led to the result. And so I will say, Magandangu Maga. Aking Maga Kaibagan, Maraming Salama for coming by and checking out my video. Mabu Hai. And for all my people in Norway, I'll say hello. God Morgan. It's not morning yet in Norway. It is actually, I believe, 6:30. But I think by the time a lot of people will be watching this video, it will be morning to them or in the middle of the night. So I'll say tax. Tak for coming by and checking out my video. And anybody who is Norwegian, feel free to let me know if I'm slightly being inaccurate with the words. But I will say that Norwegian is a Germanic language and English is a Germanic language as well. So what I noticed when I was looking at the words are very, very similar to English. So it is probably going to be one of the easier languages for me to learn, just like the Romance languages. But anyway, if you guys are ready to go, I did want to give a shout out. To my guy. Let me make sure I got everything correctly. Yes, Steve Arcega. I appreciate you. Maraming Salamat Kaibagan for watching my stuff, being in support of everything I got going on. I do have 942 subscribers at this moment, so I need 58 subscribers. And then I'm A-okay and I'm done. And I'm not bothering y'all about the subscriptions anymore. Just need the 58. Be the 58. Appreciate it very much. Salamat, tax. Muchas gracias. Shukran. Whatever else. Merci beaucoup. Whatever else you could think of. Anyway, if you guys are ready, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. All right, so we have Magnus Carlsen as white. We have Wesley so as black, and this is the 7th round. It is the first game that they play with each other. So we have D4, and we got knight to F6. We got C4. We got E6. We got knight to C3, and we have bishop to B4. So we have the Nimzo Indian on the board. So like I always say, all the people that really love openings, talking about openings, things like that, this is one for you. The Nimzo Indian, one of the more popular openings to talk about in chess circles. So we have knight to F3. We have castles. We got queen to B3. We got C5. Pawn takes C5. Knight takes, knight to A6. Now, of course, we have two different options. We could just take directly with the bishop. But knight to A6 it does really good because, it does give you the ability to take with either one of these pieces. And it also develops a piece. So a lot of the times when you're playing your games, if you can force a developing move, it is usually better than not forcing a developing move and moving the first, one piece multiple times, which at the end of the day, this game will show you that even between a U.S. champion and a world champion, sometimes they do neglect the basic opening principles. But don't get in the habit of doing that. These guys, they're a little bit stronger than your average players. So every now and then, a slight, varying from, the principles usually isn't too bad of a situation. But we have bishop to D2. We got bishop takes C5, and we do have bishop to G5. And this is the first part in the game where we do see a neglection of opening principles. Because generally you are not supposed to, move a piece twice in the opening. You're supposed to develop every piece once, get castled, and then you can start moving pieces after you've secured all of the basic fundamentals, development, king safety, stuff like that. And as you guys know, it's a lot easier to get to a novelty of a game a lot quicker when you are moving pieces multiple times, because it's just not something that would have normally happened unless it was forced. So like I said, we do have the novelty of the game here. So we see B6, and black is actually doing very well because they are a little bit further ahead because they have not neglected basic opening principles. So it's kind of a way, for you to kind of feel that one player is a little bit further ahead than the other player is. So we do see E3, bishop comes to B7, we see bishop to E2, and then we see bishop to B4. And as you guys see, you know, now Wesley So has actually given the tempo back, you know, the initiative a little bit back here, because, you know, you had Magnus Carlsen go bishop to D2 and then bishop to B5, bishop to G5, and then you saw the bishop come back here and then come back here. So Wesley So has kind of evened things up. And so something that would have actually probably been a little bit better was to just challenge the bishop here on by moving H6. And then after bishop took F6, queen took F6, after A3, we would see something like queen G6. And as you guys can see, this is a lot more attacking of a position. You know, so we'd probably see castles by white and maybe F5, F4, or something like that, you know, for black, trying to open some lines to this king here. But that was just one, you know, it's slightly better than what was played in the game. But like I said, we did have bishop to B4. We see A3, bishop takes C3. And so we have queen takes C3. And now you see that you have a problem with this piece being pinned to the queen. And so you're standing a chance of having your structure damaged. So we do see knight to E4. And that's offering a queen trade. So there's definitely different ways that you can do this queen trade. You can just directly take the queens and then just give the pieces up. Or you can try to do like a little Zwischenzug. So, you know, what happens in this particular situation is, you know, there is a Zwischenzug. So we see bishop takes D8, knight takes C3, and then we have the very accurate bishop to E7. You know, like I said, I mean, you can take this piece here and let that piece be taken, but you would be damaging your structure by doing so. So you always want to be looking for those in-between moves, what they, you know, call in German Zwischenzug moves. So we have a rook F to E8, and so we see bishop to D6. And as you can see, this bishop is serving a really good purpose because now this pawn doesn't really have the ability to move. So it's kind of preventing black from, you know, fully utilizing his rooks. So we see knight takes E2, king takes E2, and as you can see, this king is covering this knight, so bishop can't take, damaging the structure. So we see rook A to C8. We see rook A to C1, knight to C5. We have a rook H to D1, knight to E4. Not worrying about getting rid of this bishop here because we will have a backward pawn to target. You know, of course, if we have something, you know, like this, you know, we're going to be able to push pawn here and then move the rook over. And then you see we're doing some, you know, some nice building up on this pawn here. So we're not going to be doing that. So after A4, we saw F6 and then we saw B3. So we got A5. Bishop to A3, we have D5, knight to D4. We see pawn takes C4, pawn takes C4. We have knight to C5, knight to B5. You know, of course, threatening the direct fork here. You know, trying to pick up one of these rooks. So we see rook E to D8. We see bishop takes C5. We see pawn takes C5, and a move that's a little bit unexpected is actually F3 in this position. You kind of felt like, you know, the knight being put here, the bishop taking here, it was setting up for, you know, knight coming to D6 because, you know, then you're going to be forking the rook and the bishop. And you definitely want to get rid of this bishop in this type of an open position because it is a little bit superior to this knight. Knights have a hard time attacking or defending pieces that are spread out throughout the board. And a bishop has an easier time attacking and defending pawns that are spread out. So you would see something like rook to C7. After knight took B7, rook would take D1, rook would take D1, and you'd see rook taking B7. You know, this rook is doing fairly well. It's fairly even, but, you know, it's just kind of a slight advantage that white would have had in this position here. So, like I said, we do see F3. And then after we see king to F8, we see E4. Let me get this right here. Okay. And then we got king to E7. We have king to E3. We got E5. We have G4, rook to B8. We have H4, bishop to C6. We see rook takes D8, rook takes D8. We see G5. Bishop comes back to E8. Pawn takes F6, pawn takes F6. And we see rook to G1. And after bishop to F7, we see rook to G7. And as you can see, black kind of you know, strap themselves with a slight problem, but it's actually not too bad because you can actually do your own little counterattack. So it might seem bad that this rook is attacking this pawn and pinning this bishop. You know, the move that Wesley So chose in the game, which was it was solid, but it was just there was actually a better continuation in the position. So if we just back up here, instead of h5, if you want to go ahead and stop the video and see what the best move to play in the position here is, go ahead and do that real quick. Okay, cool. So in the game, we saw h5 played, f4, and then king to f8. So we kind of saw the move as the game went on. King to f8 attacking this rook. But it was a little bit better if you had done it just straight outright. Because, of course, if the rook did take, you were going to be trapping this rook because it can only move here. And then after this, the rook is trapped. So it's not going to do that. We would see the rook come back down to f2. And then after bishop takes c4, we see rook to c2, and after rook takes rook to d3 with check, the king is going to be forced down to f2. And this is kind of going to become relevant in a minute because you'll see this position again just in a little while. So we would see, like, you know, bishop to b3, rook would take c5, and then we'd see rook to bishop to d1, and then we'd be threatening this coming up pretty soon. And it's just a really solid position for white. But we did see h5 after f4. We saw the king come to f8, but now, as you can see, there's a little bit more space for the king to maneuver after f4 is played. So bishop takes c4, we see pawn takes e5, pawn takes e5, rook to c1, and then after rook to d3, like I said, you see that the king has a little bit more movability here. So it's just a little bit better position for white. So a king comes to f2, rook to d2 with check, we see king to e3, rook to e2 with check, we saw king to f3, bishop to d3, rook takes c5, rook takes e4, we see knight to c3, rook takes h4, rook takes a5, rook to c4, knight to d1, we have bishop to c2, knight to e3, we see rook to f4 with check, king comes down to e2, bishop takes a4, rook takes e5, and as you guys can see, we're heading into a draw. There's a way after h4, there's actually a way for white to force the draw, and that is what Magnus Carlsen does. He plays rook to f5 with check, because, you know, that is a fork between the rook and the king, and of course you can't just move the king and lose the rook. So you're gonna have to trade here, and after we see rook takes, knight takes, bishop to d7, you can even push the pawn here. You know, this king is gonna be coming over, and so there's not really a good way to defend this pawn. And so what they end up doing is just trading down. Bishop comes to d7. Knight takes on h4. And as you guys can already see, they played a couple more moves. As you guys can see, though, you know, this is an impossible mating material. You can't mate with a knight and a king by itself, and you can't mate with a bishop and a king by itself. So this is already a draw, but they do play bishop to g4 with check. The knight covers, and then the bishop takes on f3, and this is the point where they basically just go ahead and draw the game. So that is the first game, and I feel like Wesley So is doing very good in this second game. Let me see, what does it look like? I don't know yet. They might still be playing. They might still be playing that, but it's looking really good. It's looking really good for Wesley So. So I will be back in just a minute with this next game. Hopefully, for my people in the Philippines, Wesley So does win. And I will try to make an attempt again. I will say Masaya Akong. Man, is it Matabi? Masabi? Makita Kang Muli. I'm going to get that down at some point. It is a long phrase to try to say. In French, they would say, "Ça me fait plaisir de te voir." It is nice to see you again. I learned that about 1.5 years ago, so I got it in my brain. So it's going to take me probably another day or two to get that one down, but I will get it. So I appreciate everybody coming by, and I will see you guys next time. All right, appreciate it.